I never thought a simple dinner could unravel everything I had worked so hard for. That evening started like any other, quiet, routine, with the faint aroma of baked chicken wafting from the kitchen. I had spent hours preparing the meal, making sure every detail was perfect. After all, it was my husband's birthday, and I wanted our son, David, and his wife, Melanie, to feel welcomed, loved, and comfortable. I had always prided myself on keeping our family close, even after my husband passed. But as soon as Melanie sat down, I noticed a tension I couldn't ignore. She didn't smile as warmly as before. Her eyes darted around the room, observing everything with the kind of scrutiny that made me shrink in my chair. My son, David, oblivious as usual, poured himself a glass of wine and said, "Mom, it smells amazing. You always make the best meals." "Thank you, honey," I said, forcing a smile, hiding the creeping unease in my chest. I had learned over the years that appearances mattered, especially around Melanie. She had a way of making me feel like I was always one step behind, one mistake away from being invisible. Melanie's lips curved into a tight smile, but her words cut through me like ice. "You know, Mom, you're not even half the woman my mother is." The fork slipped from my trembling hand. My heart stopped for a second, and the world around me blurred. I pushed my chair back slowly, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor, sounding louder than any words could. I wanted to reply, to defend myself, to tell her she had no right, but all I could do was stare at her. David's hand landed on mine, warm and steady. "Mom, don't," he started, but his voice lacked conviction. "Half the woman my mother is," Melanie repeated, her tone sharp, deliberate. "I mean it. She's graceful, smart, and knows how to run a household. You try, but you're you." I felt a flush rise to my face, a mixture of shame and disbelief. I had raised David on my own after my husband's untimely death, taught him values, honesty, and respect. I had juggled work, home, and parenthood, sacrificing everything for my son and his happiness. And now, in front of him, Melanie's words made me feel small, invisible, like none of it mattered. I don't understand," I said slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I raised David with love. I've done everything I could for this family." Melanie leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Love isn't enough, Mom. There's more to being a woman, a mother, a wife, and you'll never compare to my mother." I felt tears sting my eyes, the warmth of my frustration and hurt clashing with my fear of causing a scene. I had always been composed, always kept my dignity, but tonight, something inside me snapped. I stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly again. "You don't get to measure me by your mother," I said, my voice rising despite my shaking knees. "You don't know what it's like to raise a child alone, to face the world without your husband, and still try to keep love alive in your home." David looked between us, his face pale, caught in the middle of a storm he hadn't seen coming. "Mom. Melanie, please, let's not," but Melanie ignored him, her eyes narrowing. "I just think it's sad that you expect me to respect you when you don't even come close to the standard my mother set. Maybe one day you'll understand what it really means to be a woman, to be a mother." The words cut deeper than I could have imagined. I turned toward the kitchen, gripping the countertop so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind raced, flashbacks of sleepless nights, of helping David with homework, of all the sacrifices I had made, all the meals I had cooked, all the love I had given. Was it never enough? I wanted to scream, cry, run anything but sit there and take it. My body trembled, my heart pounded, and my mind spun with a mix of anger, sorrow, and disbelief. I realized then that this wasn't just about words. This was about control, about power, about someone trying to rewrite my worth in my own home. I slowly turned back to them, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You want me to measure up to someone else? Fine. But understand this: love, compassion, and sacrifice can't be measured by comparison. You may think your mother is perfect, but perfection doesn't raise children, it doesn't build a home, and it certainly doesn't teach resilience. That's what I've done." Melanie's smug expression faltered slightly, and I could see the shift in David's eyes, pride, sorrow, and the dawning realization that his wife had crossed a line. But the damage had already been done. I felt the tension tighten in my chest, a storm brewing inside me that I couldn't yet calm. That night, I lay awake in my bedroom, replaying the confrontation over and over. I thought about my late husband, and how he would have handled this. I thought about the years of quiet endurance, the nights I cried alone after Melanie left in anger, and the hope that David would one day see me for who I truly was. But now, I knew something had to change. I couldn't let these words define me. I couldn't let them make me doubt my worth. Some lessons are harsh, learned not in classrooms but in the living rooms of our own homes. And some battles are fought not with fists, but with courage, with the refusal to let others diminish the light you've spent a lifetime nurturing. The next morning, the house felt heavier, almost suffocating. I stayed in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold, my mind still replaying Melanie's cutting words. I couldn't understand how someone could say such things about me, in my own home, where I had given everything to my son and this family. The quiet ticking of the wall clock was the only sound, and each tick seemed to mock me, counting down the hours until confrontation. David hadn't left his bedroom all morning. I could hear the faint murmur of him on a call with his work, avoiding any conversation with me. It pained me more than Melanie's insults. My son's silence felt like betrayal. I wanted to call him out, to demand that he stand by me, but I knew that shouting wouldn't solve anything. I had learned over the years that patience and strategy mattered more than anger. The day passed slowly, each hour heavier than the last. I decided to tidy the living room, partly to distract myself and partly to reclaim some semblance of control over my environment. As I moved the cushions and straightened the frames, I noticed a stack of papers tucked under the coffee table, bills, letters, and what seemed to be a journal belonging to Melanie. My curiosity got the better of me. I hesitated for a moment, considering boundaries, but my heart urged me forward. I opened the journal carefully, scanning the entries. At first, it seemed like the usual mundane notes, but then I found passages that made my stomach twist, complaints about me, my house, and my influence over David. She had written about how she felt trapped, how she wanted more control, and even hints about manipulating David to see things her way. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The girl I had welcomed into our family with open arms had been plotting in silence all along. I realized then that Melanie's words at dinner were just the tip of the iceberg, a way to assert dominance, to see if I would crumble. I clenched my fists, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. Later that afternoon, I confronted her. "Melanie," I said, holding the journal tightly in my hand. "We need to talk." She looked up from her phone, feigning innocence. "About what?" I placed the journal on the counter. "This. I know what you've been thinking, planning, how you've been undermining me." Her face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." I shook my head, feeling tears threaten to spill. "Don't lie to me. I've raised David with love, with everything I had. And you've been trying to turn him against me, making me feel like I'm not enough. How could you?" For a moment, there was silence, and then, slowly, her mask slipped. "You don't understand, Mom. Your generation, you cling to the past. You expect me to just fit in, to worship the life you built. But it's suffocating. David needs me, and you're always here, always hovering, always judging." I felt a surge of hurt and anger. "Judging? I raised your husband. I nurtured this family. You think that makes me suffocating? I only wanted to give you love, guidance, and respect. I never asked for anything in return." Melanie's eyes flashed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of insecurity, a crack in her facade. Maybe you are right, but it's hard to see that when you act like you're perfect. You're not perfect, Mom. You've made mistakes, just like anyone else." Her words stung, but I knew she was also right. I wasn't perfect. I had lost my husband too soon, struggled with fear, and made mistakes in raising David. But perfection wasn't what mattered. Love, effort, and truth were what counted. And that was something Melanie could never take away. The next days were tense. David finally spoke with me, expressing confusion and frustration. He was torn between loyalty to his wife and the mother who had raised him, nurtured him, and stood by him through every storm. Our conversations were difficult, emotional, and raw. I reminded him of the values he grew up with: honesty, empathy, and integrity, and gently urged him to see Melanie for who she truly was, without anger, but with clarity. One afternoon, I found a letter tucked in the kitchen drawer, a note Melanie had accidentally left behind. It revealed her plans to pressure David into moving me into assisted living, to make the house completely hers. My heart sank. I realized then that the confrontation at dinner was only the beginning. The battle for respect, for dignity, and for family harmony was far from over. I decided then that I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to assert myself, not with rage, but with courage. I began documenting everything: incidents, words, and manipulations, knowing that if things escalated further, I would need evidence. And deep down, I also realized something. This wasn't just about Melanie. It was about protecting the memory of my late husband, the home we built together, and the values that had shaped our family. It was about teaching David, and even Melanie, that manipulation and disrespect would never go unchallenged. That night, I sat in the quiet living room, reflecting on everything. Pain, betrayal, anger, they were heavy, but they also sharpened my resolve. I couldn't change Melanie overnight, nor could I make David see clearly immediately. But I could stand my ground, reclaim my voice, and ensure that truth, love, and integrity prevailed. The next morning, the house felt thick with tension, the kind that makes every sound echo louder than usual. I knew today would be the turning point. I couldn't let Melanie's manipulation continue unchecked. I had spent nights documenting her words, actions, and schemes, and I was determined to address them with clarity and courage. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore, it was about preserving my dignity, protecting David, and ensuring our family didn't fracture irreparably. David came into the kitchen, his eyes wary. "Mom, I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, voice heavy with guilt. "I feel like I'm caught between you and Melanie." I reached out, placing a hand over his. "David, you're not caught between anyone. You're caught between truth and convenience. I'm here, speaking truth. Melanie, she's choosing convenience over honesty. But you have to remember, the values I raised you with matter more than temporary comfort." He looked down, nodding slowly. "I know, Mom. I want peace. I don't want a war in the family." "And you won't have one," I said softly, though my heart pounded. "But peace starts with respect. And that respect has to be mutual. Melanie's actions have crossed the line." I called Melanie into the living room. Her posture was stiff, her arms crossed tightly, but there was an undercurrent of tension. I could sense that even she knew the confrontation was coming. I took a deep breath, my voice steady and firm. "Melanie," I began, "we need to talk openly. No pretense, no half-truths. I know about your plans, your words, and your attempts to manipulate David. You have undermined me, insulted me, and disrespected this home, our family's foundation. I won't tolerate it anymore." Her eyes narrowed, but for the first time, I saw something else, a flicker of awareness, maybe even fear. "Mom, she started, but I held up my hand. "No interruptions. Listen first, speak later," I said, my voice unwavering. "I raised David with love, care, and integrity. I built this home with my late husband. Every sacrifice I made was for this family. And yet, you came in and tried to rewrite all of that with a few words and manipulations. That ends today." David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I looked at him and then back at Melanie. "This isn't about anger, Melanie. It's about boundaries, respect, and the truth. If you cannot accept that, then this household will no longer be a place for your power plays. You will respect this home, or you will leave. It's that simple." The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Melanie's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I thought she would lash out, but instead, her defenses crumbled. You don't understand," she whispered, her voice shaky. I thought I was doing the right thing. I wanted control because I wanted to protect David and me." I softened slightly, sensing the vulnerability beneath her arrogance. "Protection doesn't come from taking over someone else's life. It comes from love, honesty, and partnership. David is your husband, you are partners. But manipulating, undermining, or comparing me to your mother won't ever protect anyone. It only creates division. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a fleeting moment, I glimpsed the girl who had once been part of our family, before pride and insecurity had hardened her heart. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. I know, I replied, but intent isn't enough. Actions matter. Words matter. And you must take responsibility. David, finally finding his voice, spoke up. Melanie, I love you, but Mom is right. We need honesty, not manipulation. If we're going to be a family, it has to be based on respect, not fear or comparison. Melanie nodded slowly, the weight of realization settling on her shoulders. You're right. I've been unfair. I thought I was protecting our family, but I see now that I've caused more pain. I exhaled, feeling the tension ease slightly. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next. We can heal this family, but it requires humility, apology, and change. Over the next few weeks, Melanie's demeanor shifted. She began helping around the house, genuinely participating rather than controlling. She apologized to David for her manipulations and, more importantly, to me, for the harsh words and undermining actions. Slowly, walls began to crumble. David and I grew closer through this ordeal. He acknowledged his hesitation and promised to be more vigilant, to not allow anyone to disrupt the trust and love that had been the foundation of our family. Our bond strengthened, and the house once heavy with tension began to feel like home again. One evening, as I sat in my favorite chair, sipping tea, I looked at Melanie and said softly, "It takes courage to admit mistakes. That's the mark of a strong woman, not comparison to anyone else." She nodded, a small smile breaking through. "I hope I can become half the woman you are, Mom." I chuckled softly, the warmth returning to my chest. You don't need to compare yourself to anyone. Just be honest, loving, and true. That's more than enough. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Strength isn't measured by dominance or perfection, but by the courage to face mistakes, the willingness to change, and the resilience to uphold love even when it's tested. The house, the family, and our hearts had been tested, and though scars remained, so did growth, understanding, and hope. Sometimes, life's most painful lessons bring the deepest revelations, and in confronting betrayal, we can find redemption, clarity, and renewed bonds that no harsh words or manipulation can ever erase.